All right. Great. We're live. So, all right. Good evening, everyone. So tonight we'd like to thank Shardule for being with us and helping us tackle the concept of karma and Jainism. So, for the few of you who may not know, Shardule was one of the co-chairs in 2009, 2010, and that was when the YJ convention was held in New Jersey. That happened to be my first convention ever as well. He was also director of education before that and was behind the FAQs that you see on the YJ website right now. And speaking of which, if you ever have a doubt or question about Jainism, you should definitely go check that out. And then he's also been very involved with YJ over the past few years with retreats, sessions, and the Jain Academic Bowl. So he has a lot of knowledge to draw upon. So tonight we're going to be talking about karma because it's a topic that a lot of us are asked to talk about when our friends ask us about Jainism or when others are asking us about our beliefs in Jainism. And so examples are like, I know I've been asked before, do you actually believe in karma? Do you think there's tiny particles in the air and why can't we see them? Or even things like, do you believe that karma is going to bind to your soul, but it only affects you in your next life? And does that mean that there's a universal form of justice? And then what decides what's good and what's not? So there's a lot of questions out there, and having answers to these is probably really tough. So we wanted to explain this topic further. So there's a lot of depth and connections to Jain philosophy, and that's what we want to break down. And so we want to also make sure that a lot of you guys have stay involved. So as you're watching, if you have questions, go to the Q&A app. There should be an annotation on the YouTube video, and if you click Q&A, you'll be able to put in your questions, and then we'll be able to see them and we'll address them either during the chat or at the end. So we have a couple of broad questions. So let's get started with addressing that. So let's begin. So on a general level, what do you think can you describe the concept of karma?
So is my microphone, is it good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, awesome. So the way I see it, karma is the result of all of your actions. It's the very concept of thinking about what you do on a daily basis and the result of your every word, your every thought, and every action. So that is what that's what karma is to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I definitely agree. I think so in my opinion, yeah, karma is like if every action, every thought, or every word that you say has an effect on the future, and it's all intrinsically, everything that we do is intrinsically going to have some effect in the future, and so karma is just a natural part of the universe that results in cause and effect. And yeah, so I think the thing with karma is that sometimes it can result in a lot of restrictive thoughts, and it can allow us to lash out in anger, or it can also be good. But so going on to the next question.
Actually, I have one more quick thing to add. I found this very brief definition online, and so it was done by Ashamniji, and this definition says you can see karma is the subtle physical energy which gets attracted and attached to a soul of an individual by his or her own good and bad actions. So I think it's another alternate definition of karma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And then so yeah, the thing with karma is that, like, considering it in a literal sense is where many people get tripped up. Like, it's subtle particles, but in a way it's also energy. So if you believe, like, yeah, there's some particles and then some are physically larger than others, then you start to get caught up on, like, does the size make a difference on how strong or how big of an effect that karma will have on you? And so, I mean, instead, I mean, I view it as more, some karma can be more powerful than others, and it's intrinsically how powerful it is that causes its difference. But rather than believing it's like physically different in size, that can be a place where people get tripped up. So that's just another way to look at it. It's more of a metaphor for how intertwined you are with the things that you do and their effects on you.
Karma is what you do, and so it's a different way of putting it.
Right. Okay, cool. So speaking on that, so is karma intrinsically good? Is it intrinsically bad, or is it both? And then why is this goal of a soul to rid itself of all of its karma?
So it's a complicated question, and I think the overall goal, as you mentioned, is for the soul to get rid of all of its karma. And I will go into the different types of karma later. But if you were to say, is it good, is it bad, is it both? I would probably say both, but maybe probably bad, because you're trying to get rid of it. Now, karma, as you were mentioning, is the result of your actions. But at the same time, you're trying to get rid of your karma altogether. And once you get rid of all of your karma, your soul can attain moksha, and then you'll be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So I would say karma is overall bad, but at the same time, let's not get too confused about good versus bad. It is just what you do, and it's going to happen to you no matter what. So the overall goal just should be just simply to get rid of all your karma, no matter what, one way or another. What do you think?
Yep, definitely agree with you there. So, like, the karma can be bad and good, and it comes in different forms. So you can, even though bad karma is something that we should avoid, we should for now try to do good deeds to allow good karma to enter our lives. But regardless, clearing our soul of all of its karma is what's really necessary in the end. And the main reason is, as we rise spiritually, how interconnected we are to the world is going to guaranteed for sure bring about some kind of loss, attachment, fear, and that's only going to lead to suffering. And so that's what needs to fade. I think the perfect example, or one really good example, is Gautam Swami and Mahavir Swami, where Gautam Swami was too attached to Mahavir Swami, and so he, even as hard as he tried practicing Jainism, he could not reach Keval Gnan or progress further, even though other monks were, and they weren't even as far as him. So it was only until Mahavir Swami was liberated and he was freed from that attachment itself and that karma essentially, that he was able to reach enlightenment himself. So it's this level of intertwinedness with the world around you that you have to free yourself from, and to do that, and that's the goal of all souls. So, yep, I agree with that. Anything to add?
No, I just think just to reiterate what you're saying, if the goal of your soul is to get rid of all of its karma, I think because you want to be pure, and a soul cannot be pure if all these good and bad actions are attaching itself to your soul. And so the best way to become a pure soul is simply just to get rid of everything, just to free yourself of all the actions, free yourself of the cycle of birth and death. So think of it as kind of just cleaning out your soul, the process of karma basically what I'm trying to say is the result of your actions leads to karma, and karma leads to various effects on your soul. Just trying to get rid of all of that is the entire process, is the entire goal of why we're here right now.
Right. Completely agree. Like a mental cleansing of sorts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. All right, cool. So yeah, let's actually delve into the breakdown of karma, which there's a lot of different subsets and even subsets on that, but it's broken down into 8 main categories. And so you want to go ahead and explain how that is?
Yeah, so let's start with the 8 basic types of karma. And let me see if I can pull up the types of karma here, and I'll screen share that in a second. So these are the 8 basic types of karma. And as Chintav mentioned, there's a lot of different subtypes, but let's stick to these for now. The first 4 are called gati, or destructive karma, and they are gnanavarniya karma, or knowledge covering energy, darshanavarniya karma, or intuition covering energy, mohanya karma, attitude and conduct diluting energy, antaraya karma, an obstacle creating energy. These are the 4 destructive karmas. And the 4 non-destructive karmas, these are more like characteristics. I would say Vedaniya karma, and this is the type of karma that is pain and pleasure producing. Ayush karma, which is a lifespan determining energy. So, how long, the quality of life, how long you're going to live. Nam karma is the body shaping energy, basically determining the type of body you're going to inhabit when your soul goes into a body. And Gotra karma is whether you're going to be of a higher or lower status. So again, the first 4 are destructive, and the last 4 are non-destructive. It's a very generalization of the 8 types of karma. So Chinta, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, so yeah, I think the biggest thing is the first 4 are ones that really prevent us from rising up and prevent us from rising up spiritually, while the second set of 4, which is our lifespan, things like our social status, our appearance, and our happiness, those are things that are more out of our control and are karmas that will naturally occur just because we have to have a body, and those will fade away once we reach liberation, once we reach moksha. But yeah, the main 4 that we should be focusing on are those first 4, and trying to overcome the effects of karma from those first 4. And so, yeah, like you said, knowledge obscuring, perception obscuring, conduct obscuring, and energy obscuring. And so, to anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I think, do you want to go into detail? Let's go into detail on the first 4 a little bit. What do you think?
Yep, definitely. Let's do that.
Okay, I don't want to go into too much of the semantics of it, but I just think a little bit of a description. So Gnanavarniya karma is the type of karma which prevents you from gaining as much knowledge as you can. There are various things that happen to you, various things that happen to your soul that prevent you from obtaining as much knowledge as possible. And so because of that, you accumulate Gnanavarniya karma. Darshanavarniya karma is faith, intuition covering energy. And so that is the type of karma which obscures your faith. Mohaniya karma will go into a little bit more detail afterward, but this is called deluding karma. And there's a lot of different subtypes of this. And just as kind of a teaser, this is the most difficult karma to get rid of. And the last one is called antaray karma. So an obstacle. For example, I'm not sure if this is the best example, but you're trying to go to the darasa to do puja, or even just to do darshan, and you get into some kind of an accident. And that might be an example of antaray karma, because you're trying to do some kind of spiritual activity, but in the course something happened to you. And so that's why it's called obstacle.
So. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good example. It's essentially the way I define it is it's your spiritual energy being diminished or it being caught up. So yeah, if you're on your way to the temple or if you're trying to fast and you're having a lot of trouble with it, that's also considered antaray karma. If you're trying to give to charity and you're unable to, or you are able to, that's considered your antaray karma. So different things like that, but. Yep.
It's also important to note that in the process of, in the cycle of birth and death, you get rid of your first 4 karma first, and then in the very end of the process of birth and death, you get rid of the last 4. So as Chinta was mentioning, it's really important to focus on the first 4, because these are the ones that we kind of have a direct control over during our day-to-day lives. And the result of what we do with the first 4 will lead to changes in the last 4. But for now, I think it's important to really focus on the first 4 and actions we can take to get rid of this first 4 karma.
Yep, definitely agree. And can you give examples of the other 3 karmas as well?
Let's see. Oh, sorry. I did not mean to screen share that. Hold on. Give me one quick second. Yeah. So Gnanavarniya karma, again, if you have a better example, please feel free to chime in. But if you disrespect a text of some kind, if you step on a book, whether some kind of a religious text, if you tear pages out for whatever reason, that's causing you karma. And so disrespecting any kind of a knowledge, any kind of a text would be one example of Gnanavarniya karma. Or disrespecting teachers, those who are trying to help you learn, that would be another example of Gnanavarniya karma. I mean, what do you have?
And yeah, to like add to how you could understand that concept of karma. So when you disrespect something, like say a book or a teacher, so part of it you can consider it as all right, particles are coming in and I guess being attracted to your soul. But another way to think about it is you're attracting karma because you are, by having that action, by having those thoughts towards something, you're slowly taking away your ability to appreciate that or give that thing value. So if you start to disrespect your books, or you throw your backpack every time you get home from school, that's going to start to become a recurring thing, and your value for those books of knowledge is going to be much less. And as a result, when you're studying, you're not going to care as much. When you're trying to learn from these books, you're not going to care about actually appreciating the knowledge that's in them. And so this level of how you value or how you appreciate the things that you have, that's what's really getting lowered when your actions are in line with bringing this karma in, or bringing this Ganagvarniya karma in.
I think that's a great example. So basically what you're trying to say is knowledge is sacred, and any actions that you take disrespecting that or going against that will lead to a pattern of behavior, which will just lead to, again, lack of respect for knowledge, and ultimately will lead you to not gain as much knowledge as you possibly could.
Exactly. Yep.
Great. For Darshanvarniya karma, why don't you want to take a stab at this? I have a pretty broad example, so why don't you go ahead and take a stab if you have one?
Yeah, sure. So it's perception obscuring karma, and a big subset of this is considered also how sleep affects you, and so this is also how your perception is. So how narrow-minded you can be, or how open and aware you are of a different situation. And so, in my opinion, like, this is more of its effects, or how the karma will affect you, but it's how much of a situation that you can perceive. And so it's the differences where some people will spend half a second on analyzing something and only just look at it at face value and then react, while other people will take the time to take in as much as they can, and then react once they have as much or as full of a picture of the situation as they can. So it's how much intake or how much you're perceiving at once. But yeah, do you have an example to go with it?
Well, no, I think that's a great way of putting it. I come at it from a different way, where according to what Jainism teaches, you're responsible for your own actions. But suppose you start to believe in a set of values in which I would say someone comes around and tells you, you give money and give money to this organization and change how your soul is going to go in its next life. So basically some kind of a wrong faith. And so the actions that you do or beliefs that you have which are incorrect. Now, we do preach, obviously, multiplicity of viewpoints, but there are things that are obviously wrong. And so any kind of actions that we take which would go against obscuring our faith or perception, that would lead to Darshanvarniya karma. So really trying to do the goal of getting rid of Darshanvarniya karma is to basically purify your faith and to get rid of any kind of actions that would lead to impurity, your lack of intuition regarding Jain faith. So that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Yeah, definitely. And what about Mohaniya karma?
So I think for Mohaniya karma, I think that's a little bit of a complex thing. And as we discussed earlier, it's deluding karma, and it is probably the hardest karma to get rid of. And once you free yourself from Mohaniya karma, all the other karmas will go away. So again, we want to emphasize that Mohaniya karma is the hardest karma. It means attachment. Mm-hmm. So once you get rid of your attachments, then all the other karmas become easier to get rid of. And there are two subtypes of Mohaniya karma. One is called Darshan Mohaniya, which is faith deluding, and Charitra Mohaniya, which is called conduct deluding. I'm not sure if we want to go into more detail on those, but I just want to again emphasize that Mohaniya karma is the most difficult karma to get rid of. The root of the word Mohaniya is moha, which means attachment. And once we get rid of our attachment, which is the root cause of all passions, then we can free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death. So that's the general overview of Mohaniya karma.
Yep, definitely. And yeah, just to add to that, so yeah, Mohaniya karma, I guess another way to look at it is, or another definition of it is deluding karma. And so what it does is these attachments that you just mentioned will cause delusions and will cause you to view the world not as it is. And so Mohaniya karma in essence is like the inability of a person to see what the true nature of reality is. And so what that is a full understanding of any present moment or the full understanding of anything at all. So that would be Gebelgnan. And so Mohaniya karma is what prevents us from reaching that correct understanding of anything. And so, so the thing is, we're unable to see this because I've always thought that as we grow older, as we are human beings, we have a brain that tends to filter out a lot of the irrelevant information that we need, and then we only filter and we only take in what we need to know. And so, so as an example, so like in high school, you learn that an octagon has 8 sides, and then each angle within that has 135 degrees, and there's a total of 6 triangles that you can fit inside of it. But there's all these pieces and all these things to an octagon that you know exist. However, when you're driving to work and you see a stop sign, everything that I just said becomes irrelevant. Your brain will filter it out, even though the truth is that that stop sign is an octagon and there's so much more to it. Your brain is not going to actually take the time to go through all that because it's completely irrelevant to your direct situation. And so your brain will naturally just filter it out. And so our brain does this all the time. And so we're never seeing the full picture. And that's why this is essentially what Mohaniya karma is doing. And by eradicating Mohaniya karma, we can open up the mind to see the world as it really is. And so some people have been able to do this to a larger extent than others. That's why there's monks and there's ascetics that will leave behind society to take a step back from a situation, or take a step back from all worldly life and be able to view it from a grander perspective. And then some of you are able to do the same thing on a smaller level when you get into an argument, or you're able to step back and then look at why you're having this argument. So there's different levels of trying to eradicate your Mohaniya karma, but it's very much based in your passions, your anger, ego, greed, deceit. And then by removing that, by making sure that you have a better idea of what's going on, better idea of the world, you'll be able to overcome this level of narrow-mindedness that your brain naturally creates for you, and in effect, eradicate this Mohaniya karma and see reality for what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Again, I want to emphasize the 2 subtypes are the Mohaniya karma, which can delude you from having the right kind of faith, and the Mohaniya karma, which can delude you from performing the right kind of conduct. Conduct meaning like good self-restraint, calming your passions, things of that nature. And so I think a lot of that, once you do that, then again, you can free yourself of other karmas as well. So I think that's a pretty good overview of Mohaniya karma. And I think we covered Antaray karma. Do you have anything to add about Antaray karma?
Yeah, no, I think we hit it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so what would you like to cover next?
Okay, great. So so there's 3 concepts in Jainism called Ashra, Samvar, Nirjara, which is influx of karma, stoppage of karma, and eradicating karma. And so we can go into Ashra first, which is the 5. There's 5 different ways that karma can enter the soul, and so we can go into those.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead?
So, yeah, sure. So I will start. I'm also going to screen share a bit for this.
Great.
Hold on, I think I got the wrong one. Okay, so
there we go.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, the breakdown of Ashra, it comes in 5 different pieces, and so these are the 5 that it breaks down into. So this is the different types of ways that karma can become attached to your soul. And so the first is mithyatva, which is wrong belief or the soul's illusions due to mohini karma that we just mentioned. Second is avirati, which is the unrestrained lifestyle. So if you have a lack of discipline or vow-lessness, this is what is avirati, and this will also cause karma to flow into you. Then there's pramad, which is laziness or lack of awareness. Kashai, which are the passions, anger, ego, greed, and deceit. And then yog, which is the subtle activities of the mind, speech, and body. And so these are the 5 different ways that karma flows into you, and then each one of these slowly fades away as you rise spiritually. So the first thing to go will be mithyatva. Once you overcome that, then next you can try to overcome avirati, and then once you do that, the last thing that'll remain is yog. And so just to explain that a little bit further, so there's 14 different stages, and I'm not going to go into the details of this, but there's 14 different stages of spiritual upliftment, and these are called the 14 gunasthanaks. And so at the first stage, here you can see that all 5 of these causes of karma bondage are going to be present, but then slowly as you rise up, these will slowly fall away, and by the end, the only thing that's left is, here you can see, Brahma disappears at the 7th, and then Kashai will disappear from the 10th to 11th. The only thing left for Sayogic Evoli, which is where beings like Mahavir Swami were, or beings like Gautam Swami were when they were enlightened, is yog. And what this is the only subtle activities of your mind, of your body, and of your speech, which is all it is saying that when you're still living in the world, you will guaranteed still be having some form of karma because you'll have interactions with the rest of the world. But at the same time, they're not going to be based in these more harmful and negative causes of karma, which are wrong belief, being unrestrained, laziness, or the 4 passions, which is the most difficult to overcome. And so, you have anything to add?
No, I think that's a fantastic definition of the types of influx of karma. So I think that was great.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we can move on to the metaphor that you want to talk about how you can think of Ashra of Samvar Nirjara, which is influx of karma, stoppage of karma, and eradicating karma.
Let me just pull that up right here. So again, I just want to emphasize one quick thing. So what Jinta was saying earlier with regard to karma philosophy was the 9 fundamentals. And this is called the 9 tattvas. You can call them the 9 realizations, the 9 truths, whatever you would like. And this is the way that karma affects us. So we can start by defining, two things, Jeev and Ajeev. Jeev is our soul. It is the only living universal substance. Jeev is our soul, is our consciousness. Particles of karma are ajeev, or non-living substances. And as Chinta described very well, asra is the influx of karma right here on the lower left. And the next is the characteristics of bondage, or ban. And so basically this means the duration, the intensity of the type of karma. And there are kind of 2 subtypes, punya and pap. Punya is what happens. The punya means good deeds, and pap means bad deeds. So again, punya and pap. And so punya is earned, and it is also, punya is earned by our actions, and that can result in more punya or more pap. Pap is earned by our previous actions and can result in more pap or more punya. And when this happens, this leads to samvar, which is the stoppage of the influx of karma. And we can go into details regarding the different types of samvar. And once you complete this process, this is also intertwined with nirjara, which is exhaustion of your accumulated karma, eventually leading to moksha, which is total liberation from all karma. So in total, what we want to emphasize is that these 9 tattva are the ways that the karma bind to your soul and the way that you get rid of them. So before we go into more details, we just want to give you an overview of the 9 fundamentals. Chinta, do you have anything to add regarding the basics of the 9 fundamentals before we go into analogy?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it. There is one way to break it down that I've also learned, which is there's 3 that are to be avoided, 3 that are good for you, and then 3 that are to be known. And so 3 that are to be known are going to be Jeev, Ajeev, and then I believe Moksh, or no, not Moksh. So I think only Jeev and Ajeev are to be known, and then the ones that are to be avoided are Bap, Punya, and Ashrav, and then the ones that we should try to aim for are going to be Samvar, Moksh, and Nirdra. And I think Bund is one to be known. So Bund, Jeev, and Ajeev are to be known. And so yeah, there's a specific breakdown of what you want and what you don't want. And the interesting thing here is that Bap and Punya is actually also considered something that's to be avoided.
Yep.
But for souls like us who are still in the world, in worldly life, it's got more of a gray area where it's something that it can be, it's something that you should also want, but you have to know in the end that you have to avoid it.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. One thing I'd like to add is an example, and let me put it up here. Actually, I have a couple of examples. Let's see here. And we can go through them one at a time. So the first analogy I'd like to share is a man rides a wooden boat to reach the other side of a river. The man or person is Jeev, or the living, and the boat is Ajeev, non-living. Suppose the boat has a leak and water flows into the boat. The incoming of water is Asar, and accumulation is Bund. Now the man tries to save the boat by plugging the hole. Stopping the water from coming into the boat is called Samvar, and basically throwing the water outside and getting rid of it is called Nirdra. Now the man crosses the river and reaches his destination, which is Moksh. So again, the process of accumulation of karma, bondage, and getting rid of your karma, and ultimately reaching your destination. The second example here is...
One thing to add before you go into that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And there's the thing with that is as you're crossing the river, the worst thing that you can do is frantically try to take a bucket and then try to remove all the water as fast as you can without plugging the holes first. And so sometimes that's something that a lot of people do. They try to eradicate their karma, and then we'll go into this further of what that is, but they try to do Nirdra before Samvar happens. But you have to make sure that you're stopping all the inflow of karma. You completely cut that off, and only then can you start to eradicate your karma by doing thup, by doing austerities, different things that we'll talk about later. But yeah.
That's a great clarification between Samvar and Nirdra, both of which are important, but are distinct processes from each other. Mm-hmm. The second example I have is consider a family living in a house. One day they were enjoying a fresh, cool breeze coming through their open doors and the windows of the house. However, the weather suddenly changed to a terrible dust storm. The family, realizing the storm, closed the doors and windows. But by the time they could close all the doors and windows, some of the dust had been blown into the house. After closing the doors and windows, they started clearing the dust that had come in to make the house clean again. And so again, this is obviously an oversimplification, but if we just go with it, we can say the Jiva are represented by the living people, the Ajeev is represented by the house, non-living, Punya is represented by enjoyment resulting from the nice cool breeze, Bap is represented by discomfort resulting from the dust storm. Ashrav is represented by the influx of the dust. Bund is represented by the accumulation or the bondage of dust in the house. Samvar is represented by the closing of the doors and windows to stop the accumulation of dust. Nirdra is represented by the cleaning up of the accumulated dust. And Moksha is represented by the clean house, which is similar to shedding of all your karmic particles from the soul. So that's kind of just two very broad examples I just wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add to that in regard to the second example at all? Or?
No, but I think you covered it really well.
Great.
Yep, I think that was good.
So what do you want? Do you want to go into the different types of Samvara and Nirjara? What would you like to, what would you like to do next, or would you like to cover something else?
Yeah, let's go into the explaining Sambar a little bit further, and then also Nirjara a little bit further.
Great.
Okay, so yeah, so Sambar is the stoppage of karma, and so it breaks down into 57 ways, and a lot of these are different ways that you can gain control over yourself and become a more aware and then a more in control of your own actions, speech, and thoughts. And then the whole goal of this is also to remove those points of influx of karma that we mentioned earlier. And so, yeah, the breakdown of 57 is a bit more convoluted, so we're not going to go into that. But do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can just, I mean, we can use our friend Wikipedia here actually for a second. They have a very broad description. Give me 1 second. Again, this is obviously an overgeneralization, but as Chinta was mentioning, there are 57 types of ways to stop your karmic influx, and you can read more about them in detail here. But it's important to understand, at least for example, the three guptis are ways to control your mind, speech, and body. And just think about that from an everyday perspective. Everything that you do involves a thought, many times involves your speech, and also involves an action taken by your body. And so in terms of stopping your karmic influx, it is very important to have proper restraint of your mind, your speech, and your body. The next one is the 5 samitis, which is observing carefulness in your movement, speaking, eating, placing objects, and disposing of your trash. And so there are more descriptions, but again, there's many different types of ways to stop your karmic influx, and that's necessary in the process of ultimately attaining moksha.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. And then moving on to Nirjara, and like we said, you have to first be able to stop your inflow of karma before you start Nirjara, which is something that that is a problem for all of us, because what Nirjara essentially is it's a couple different types of austerities that you can do, and that will allow you to also rein in your senses and also give you self-control over your actions, your thoughts, and your speech. And so I guess we can go into a breakdown of those very briefly.
You can, or you want to screen share? Or do you want me to screen? I mean, I was going to pull up, I think Wiki has a very simple summary of it, unless you have a better one that you want to share.
Okay. Yeah, you can pull that up.
Sure.
But yeah, so it breaks down into 2 different pieces. One is external austerities and the other is internal austerities. Yep. And so some of these are outward facing and the other ones are inward facing. Some of the breakdowns are, some of it, what it breaks down into is unsun, which is fasting, unodari, which is eating less than what you need to be full. Other ones are kaya klesha, or bodily endurance to pain. Sleeping in a lonely place, daily renunciation of more food that you are already attached to, so things like butter, milk, sugar. So we do that through things like ambil, and so these are all external austerities. And then internal austerities, some of the examples are prayashit, which is atonement or penance, vinay, which is humility. Some of the other ones, swadhyay, which is scriptural study or studying spiritual knowledge, and then also dhyan, which is meditation and contemplation. And so these are more internal. These are more things that you can do to change your behavior and change your thought patterns, while the other ones are, the external ones are different ways that you can almost restrain yourself and put bounds on yourself so that you can get control over your body. And so these are all different ways to eradicate your karma. And the big issue that a lot of people have is they'll start practicing these before they focus too much on karma. They'll start to do excessive fasting or do a lot of thup, and then it doesn't come with a sense of let me learn more about let me have more spiritual knowledge, let me learn more about Jain principles, and that should also very often come with this.
I would say that, you know, we're actually performing one type of internal austerity. I would argue that in the 21st century, this is a form of svadhyaya. We're studying different scriptures, we're discussing them. And so, I mean, it may be a little bit of a loose interpretation, but I would argue that this is svadhyaya for the 21st century right here, discussing and scriptural studies. And so,
yeah, definitely agree. Any kind of discussion, like if you have religious discussions at your school, or if you go to Bachelor and you have religious discussions, that's all in itself svadhyaya as well. And then online. Yeah, agreed.
I'm not sure if anyone thought about this, you know, back during 599 BC when Mahavir was around, and even further back when you know, Jainism was around forever technically. So who knows what
it was only probably Mahavir that foresaw it, but nobody else or anybody else that did hear that wouldn't believe it, so never got written down.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, so I think that covers it in terms of Nirdra, just trying to exhaustion of karma, and ultimately with the ultimate goal being moksha, which is, you know, of course, is liberation. So I think we've covered that up pretty well. So
awesome. So I guess we only have two more main topics to talk about, and then the first is, can you go into more detail about the four kashais and what they are, and then also how they affect everybody and how, or what we have to do to overcome them?
Sure. So I'll just go into a very brief of what they are, first of all. And this is a PowerPoint that I borrowed from someone. In Sanskrit is man, maya, lobh, krodh, or ego, deceit, greed, and anger. And we know what those mean, but in case we need a refresher, greed is just to take more than your fair share. Ego is to think that we are important enough to take from other living beings. Deceit is to fool ourselves, and anger is really to build up a lot of emotion unnecessarily. And so these are the four passions, and these four passions pretty much are the root cause of any kind of influx of karma. And so, as we discussed earlier, if we can control the four kashai, then we can figure out a way to get rid of pretty much all the different types of karma. So I think that was the general overview. What did you want to add?
Yep, definitely. I think the big thing is that the four kashais are really heavily based in our attachments and in our expectations for the world. So when we expect too much from other people, or expect too much from what we're supposed to deserve, or what we deserve, or what we're supposed to get, or what we're looking to get, then that results in this frustration, or then what happens is it results in anger, or having an ego that results in violence, being deceitful towards others, which also results in violence, or having greed. And so all of these, they stem from a level of attachment or level of expectation, and the best way to overcome them is to, I guess, forego this expectation from the world, forego any level of certainty that you have that you know what's going on, and always be open to anything that comes your way.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, because if you have this certain level of expectation, then you ultimately will end up disappointed if things don't go your way, which will lead to anger and all these other kinds of negative things. Also, one thing to point out is that there's different intensities to this. So there's extremely severe, there's severe, moderate, and slight. So basically what this means is that the four passions, there's different intensities to them. From the most severe being obviously supremely angry, that could lead to potential rebirths in hell in the next life, or just slight anger. And so what we want to do is ultimately get rid of everything, these different passions. But it's important to note that Jainism does characterize them into different durations, or different intensities rather. So I think again, it's important that we think about this and how we live our daily life. ego-free life is the simplest way to go. Not necessarily thinking about I'm the most important person or I'm doing everything the right way. Deceit. I mean, if you deceive people or you deceive yourself, you're leading yourself down the wrong path. And I think greed and anger as well are extremely important to get under control. So the more you get these things under control, the easier your daily life is going to live. The easier you can do better for others and do better for yourself. So getting rid of anger, ego, deceit, and greed is extremely difficult. Obviously, we face them every single day. We interact with so many people every single day. We perform our own actions which cause anger, ego, deceit, and greed. So it's just best to try and control it.
And yeah, I think that stems really well into what next question is, which is, what's your, and this is a very interesting one, what's your interpretation of heaven, hell, and rebirth? And then do you believe, or how do you think karma follows us across lives?
Sure. I think, well, let's take the Jain text way. Let's go with strictly Jain text. And so we've been born into, our soul has been born into a human body, and we should consider that a privilege. Just to review, the 4 types of beings that we could be born as are a heavenly being, human, animal, plant, or a hellish being. And human being is actually considered the highest form of being because this is the kind of life that we could ultimately attain moksha from. So when the kinds of actions that we take will follow us from one birth to another for as long as our soul is around and has not attained moksha. So every single action that you do, as we've discussed in terms of karma theory, has a consequence. Whether the fruit of your karma will bear itself out in the next 2 minutes or in the next 2,000 life cycles, you don't quite know. So I think it's best to always know that your soul is always headed toward a better place. It's always headed toward moksha. And your actions and your thoughts and your words should always keep that in mind. If you accumulate a lot of negative actions, thoughts, and words, then your soul may be destined toward a hellish birth, and that's not something that you want. And so ultimately, that's what I think about. What do you think?
Yeah, so yeah, you talked about it perfectly in the how it's viewed in the Jain sense, and how there's 4 different types of beings that you can be: heaven, hell, animal, or plants, and then humans. And then so as for like a modern day or modern version of interpreting heaven and hell, so I've come to think of it as heaven and hell, at least, as constructs that are more about the positive and negative effects of karma within our lives, and then also rebirth as something that occurs within our lives. And so I guess one way of looking at it is, if you think about it, do you remember the person that you were 3 years back? Most likely, probably not. So, or you don't remember like who you truly were, who you really were 3 years back. And so that in itself, you can consider your past life. Even though it is one of your past lives, the things that you did then are still going to affect you positively and negatively today in this current life. And so the same will occur for your future lives. And the one thing that we need to avoid is very large karmas following us into the future. And so someone that you may have hurt 4 or 5 years back, and in a pretty bad way by, say, stabbing them in the back or having a bad relationship with them, will affect you today and onward.
You don't literally don't stab them in the back, because that would be pretty bad. So
that'd be pretty bad, yeah. And so it may not affect you like in a physical way where it affects your direct actions, but it's very likely that it'll affect you. It'll affect your thoughts, and it'll start to consume your mind, and it'll slowly come to the forefront, making you feel guilty, possibly causing you anger, more greed, build up an ego. And so, I mean, I guess there's a lot of movies that also talk about this or have this as a major theme, where somebody either dies or somebody passes on, and then the movie starts years later where the main character is constantly affected or constantly plagued by their thoughts or their guilt or something like that follows them into the future, into a future life. And so I think like the big solution to this, and Jainism also give this, is that we have to ask for forgiveness from those that we wronged, forgive everybody that's wronged us, and then give our minds peace so that they don't build up across these lives. And so that's exactly what Pratikamran is, which is it's a mental cleansing, as we mentioned, that will rid ourselves of our karmas from our past. And then also, if resulting in this sort of rebirth. This cleansing is essentially this sort of rebirth. And so this idea that there's heaven and hell and rebirth that we're going to face once we're old and once we die and then it's our next life is not the only way or the only thing that's there. I also view it as there's a level of death of our repressed thoughts and beliefs that may cause us pain, and so that allows us to become born, I guess, again. And heaven and hell is the fruits of the fruits of our actions. So if it's happiness, it's heaven, and hell, it's if it's sadness, it's hell. And so that's why this kind of mindset, I guess, makes karma a lot more real, a lot more easy to comprehend, because you see it in your day-to-day life and then across weeks. And so, yeah, you have to always know that what you do now will affect you.
I think just to add on to that, kind of to make it more relevant, the way I think about it is that you live on forever. You're still living on forever. But what I really mean by that is that when you pass away, when your body dies, you've affected a number of people in your life, and they will live on. And the way that you've affected them affects the way that they behave toward other people, the actions they take. And then this kind of an endless cycle that keeps going on and on and on. And so it's almost as if part of you is being reborn in other people constantly, because, if I die tomorrow, then, hopefully I'll affect people in a positive way, and that will change the way that they behave, and that will change the way other people behave as well. So even without the eternal concept of what is heaven and what is hell, kind of as you're referring to in a more modern everyday case, karma is a lot about how you live on. Your actions live on forever, even though you may not realize it. You live on through other people, the way that you affect your world, and that it keeps going on and on in perpetuity. So that's the way that I see it.
Yep, definitely. Cool. Okay. So yeah, I think that's all the questions that we had to focus on. And then now let's open it up to the audience, the viewers. And so you guys can ask whatever questions that you have on the app, and they'll show up on the side for us. So definitely, if you have any questions about karma, about how to view karma, or how to explain karma to others, just feel free to ask. In the meantime, we can talk about a very interesting subject, which is what if karma is this thing that affects all of our lives so heavily. Do we have free will, and then what does actually govern our lives? Is it karma? Is it free will? Both? Neither? Something else?
I would say my opinion is that they're intertwined, because Jainism is such a unique faith that the majority, Jainism doesn't preach that there's a higher being which controls your fate. You control your own fate. But at the same time, your previous actions define who you are, and that affects your future actions. So is it karma? Is it free will? I say it's both. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's both. So there's 5 samvais in Jainism, which are the causes for every event or every action. And so one of them is karma, and then another one is it's called purusharth, which is in essence self-effort, and that can be considered to an extent free will, but it's more you trying to go beyond what the environment's effects are and pursue something that is unexpected, or that's not what would be in line with what you would do. So for example, if you're, say, on a pilgrimage climbing a mountain, if you are feeling really thirsty or really tired, and this may be because of your karma, because of what you did earlier, that you're really tired and you don't think you're gonna make it. If you have this level of purusharth, or if you really push yourself, then this self-effort will allow you to continue on your way, and then complete or continue climbing. And so this is in itself an act of free will. So yeah, it's intertwined, and they're both relevant to every action.
again, I think it's important to emphasize that Jainism is one of the few faiths in the entire in the world that emphasizes both karma and free will. That your destiny is not necessarily predetermined, because your actions will determine the kind of life that you lead and your next life and things of that nature. So the result of your actions, because of your free will, will lead to good or bad things happening to your soul. So I think it's intertwined, even though it may not seem like it, because again, your past karma made you who you are. So then you're kind of wondering, well, do I have free will because I am who I am today because of my past actions? But I think it's important not to get too caught up in the complexities of it. Just think about the things that you can do to affect positive change in your life every single day, to affect positive change in the world around you. And you do have the will, you do have the free will to do that. No one's stopping you from affecting change within yourself and with other people. And that can lead to a better world. And ultimately, it'll lead to a better soul for yourself too.
Yep, great way to put it. Okay, great. I don't think we have any questions, but I think that's fine. So yeah, are there any other overall takeaways you want to address on karma?
No, I think that you did a great job of getting everyone caught up to speed on what it's karma. And I think breaking it all down to a more simple level, I just think that thinking about the actions that we do every single day, thinking about the thoughts that we have and the words that we say, how they affect others, it's extremely important, not only for our day-to-day lives, but also the fate of your soul. And so just think about it both ways, and live your life in a way that will make it easier for you to shed your karma, and ultimately that'll just lead to a better, it'll lead to a better you, I think.
Yep, definitely. Definitely agree. And yeah, I think best thing that you can do is try to understand it more by breaking it down and seeing essentially the effects of karma in your direct life and in your day-to-day life, so you can really rein it in and try to take steps to lower your or reduce your karma.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I think then that's everything. I really want to thank you for coming on and explaining all this, because I know you've got a lot of knowledge, and it was really helpful, I'm sure, to a lot of people.
I really want to thank you for guiding us through this discussion, and it was fun doing this. It's been a while since I've been in a YJ webinar, and it's always fun doing this. So I'm happy to be on there, and thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yep, definitely, and yeah, we'll try to do this again too. We're definitely gonna try to do this more often. So
yeah, I'm down for that.
We shall. Awesome. Okay then. I think that's all. And if you guys have questions, definitely reach out to us. And definitely post in that Facebook event page or anywhere else if you want to. And all right, have a good night.
All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.